Every summer in America, a force of nature becomes a man-made disaster. Some call it a war. Millions of acres, billions of dollars, no end in sight. In this episode of Fault Lines, we follow the 2013 wildfire season and ask, with more homes than ever now under threat, what are the real costs of putting them out?
The fire took a breath and we got our foot on the throat of it, and we're going to keep choking it out.
The fire started yesterday at 2:05 p.m. It spread very rapidly. We committed 84 fire engines, 24 fire crews, 8 bulldozers, 6 air tankers, 13 helicopters, 4 water tenders, and 1,000 personnel as of this morning. And I can assure you there are no bounds being placed on me as a Riverside County Fire Chief in holding back the deployment of any resources.
Early August, Southern California. The hills outside Los Angeles are on fire. California's governor has declared a state of emergency. We've just arrived on the scene. The situation is critical.
The entire mountainside is smoldering. There's thick, acrid smoke smell in the air, and we're just following this strike team now right to the top of the mountain to where the fire line begins.
For this blaze, the combined might of the firefighting forces of California is on full display.
Number 2 priority for today.
In just 24 hours, the costs have already run into the millions.
It's been a busy season. It started really early for us in California. We had pretty significant fires in May, which is pretty rare. It just seems like a lot of fires are burning. As far as an outlook for the season, it's going to be a busy one.
These are serial conflagrations now, and they're magnifying themselves, and the costs are enormous.
Costs like this sprawling fire camp that's emerged overnight to support the thousands of personnel deployed.
You think of how much money they spend in one of these camps. You know, there's a lot of people here, there's a lot of fuel going out.
The fires are now so predictable, it's become a business opportunity. The costs covered almost entirely by the American taxpayer.
But if you were going to list the aspects of the camp that are outsourced to outside contracts?
Showers, water, toilets, food. You got laundry service that's contracted out.
It's like a mini city.
It is a mini city.
And it's not just small-time vendors. Even major assets like aircraft are often privately leased.
You know, we get the big tankers and stuff come in, the big helicopters. Those costs rack up. It takes a lot of money to keep those things flying. And
what kind of money are we talking about?
when you get into the Type 1 helicopters, they run around $7,000 an hour.
We also have created, since the 80s, really a private sector force for a private sector industry, really. Some people are calling it now the fire industrial complex.
Watch your time, gentlemen. Just go ahead and spread out a little bit. We're all right.
The scale of the operation is so huge that in California, thousands of prison inmates are drafted in as cheap labor. Wearing orange jumpsuits and under tight watch, they're given some of the toughest missions on the fire.
Do you get paid or?
Yeah, we get a $1 an hour.
It's not a lot, is it?
No.
So why do you do it?
Different environment rather than being in a prison yard. We have actual freedom. They feed us way better.
Sometimes we work 36-hour shifts, 48s. But I feel like heroes at the end of the day, you know?
Meanwhile, the winds are picking up, and fire commanders are calling in wave after wave of air power.
They're trying to control this blaze from the air because the wind is so unpredictable that they don't want the firefighters getting any closer to the blaze. So they're dropping in from the helicopters to control the fire from here.
It looks like an emergency, and it certainly feels like one when you're out here. But this has actually become just business as usual.
The fires are burning twice as long, but twice as big compared to a decade ago. The costs have tripled The number of people who are dying keeps escalating. The number of homes burnt is growing exponentially. You add climate change on top of that, and it's the big accelerator. People are starting to ask, who's paying for this firefighting? You make an individual decision to build a home there, but what's the cost to the rest of us?
1,000 miles away, in Colorado, a small building catches fire in the hills of Black Forest. Today, as the smoke clears, we've come to see the impact of what's been declared the most devastating blaze in the history of the state. Nearly 500 homes destroyed. A couple burned to death in their garage as they tried to escape.
It's a really eerie place. There's almost no sound at all from wildlife. The area around here is almost completely destroyed. The trees are all black, and you can see the houses have been burned so badly that it's really just the foundations that are remaining now.
It's been just hours since the fire swept through here. Its intensity means these crews will be needed for many weeks yet. But as we're about to find out, it seems the worst of the damage has already been done.
In the last few hours, they've opened up a very small section of the fire zone, and now some of the residents are starting to go in and discover their homes that have been reduced to rubble by wildfire.
Sharon Wright was living alone when the fire hit. Her husband passed away last year.
Got one call that said the house was in good condition, and then just within an hour after that, I got another call that said it's gone. So it went that fast. Dear.
This is the first time she's seen what's left of their home of 27 years.
Oh, yeah, that's too bad.
How did you feel when you saw it?
I felt nothing but numb. And you think about all the work you put into it and everything that you've done for improvements over the years.
And the memories as well, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Even the urn containing her husband's ashes was left behind.
I have 3 sets of clothes, 1 pair of shoes. I have my dog's medical stuff, my medical stuff, a few tax things, and that's really about it. That's what I have. Everything else is here. It's heartbreaking.
These people have decided that today they will be arrested.
I know that I'm being surveilled.
People are not getting the candidates.
This is a crime against humanity.
They're running towards the big explosions going on. We're not quite sure what it is.
To watch more episodes of the Emmy Award-winning series Fault Lines, check your local listings or visit aljazeera.com.
If fires in the American West are getting more frequent and costlier to fight, the question is why?
Well, the combustibility is mostly on the ground. It's these needles when they dry out, the small stuff.
Stephen Pine says there's a perfect storm of factors. Build-up of dry brush, warmer temperatures due to climate change, and decades of poor land management.
Excluding fire from systems that had known it for thousands and in some cases millions of years.
But it's just needles from the pine.
Well, they're just needles, but the needles are very combustible.
And now, there's a new problem to contend with. In the last decade alone, some estimate that 2 out of every 3 new homes in the US have been built in fire-prone areas.
Basically, what we're doing is recolonizing rural America. Just as agricultural frontier in the 19th century gave rise to a wave of fires that burned over whole communities, we've repeated that in a new form.
The Black Forest Fire was in an area of Colorado that's seen some of the most intensive spread of this kind of development. Projects like Cathedral Pines, which was right in the path of the fire.
And we did 59 lots, and I sold every single lot in one day.
That's incredible.
The market was hot, and people loved the community, loved being in the trees.
Bart Atkinson spent years developing this multi-million-dollar residential complex in the middle of untouched pine forest. In the end, Cathedral Pines escaped unscathed, partly because this was one of the first places the fire engines headed to.
It literally split and went around.
It went around us. And then, of course, they were dipping their helicopters right here, and I saw aerial views from news cameras, and I saw them actually in the driveways of the homes with their fire trucks fighting the fire that very first day.
So all this area is the private.
Bart has spent large sums on fire protection for the development, and he says risk of wildfire shouldn't dictate where you can or can't build a home.
Yes, this is the house. I think, you know, we as Americans should have the right to build and live where we want to live. I think our community actually proves a point that you can build in a very densely forested area if you do the right things in mitigation and take the right precautions. You can live here safely.
Part of this is sort of the Western mythos of we can do whatever we want anywhere.
For economist Ray Rasker, it's new developments like Cathedral Pines that are largely to blame for the rising cost of wildfires. And it's an upward spiral, he says, because local governments reap tax benefits from their construction.
And if they perceive that they're going to get more money from rubber stamping subdivisions all over the place, they will. The Forest Service, the Bureau of Land Management, FEMA, they're the ones who are paying for the bulk of the firefighting costs. So for local governments who permit new developments, they don't have to think of the cost.
So while the bill for fires like Black Forest can stretch to the tens of millions of dollars, almost all of it comes from the public purse.
It's not unusual in some fires for the cost of defending each home to be $400,000, in some fires up to $600,000 per home.
Per home?
Per home. But in some instances, you're better off buying the land than paying to defend the homes.
To actually contain this fire, it's taken elements of the National Guard from 3 states. It's taken more than 1,100 emergency personnel, 103 fire engines. There have been helicopters deployed. The bill so far has run to more than $5.5 million, and it hasn't even been a week since the fire started.
With the fire now under control, local residents line the streets. Their nightmare finally over.
You can really feel the appreciation that everybody here has for the firefighters coming back from their shifts. But the one thing that's really made a difference in containing this fire isn't necessarily the amount of resources that have been deployed. It's actually the change in the weather.
But 2 other major blazes have just appeared in neighboring states. And some say scenes like this, throughout fire season, often obscure a bigger picture.
It makes a narrative that's easily understood, brave people going out and fighting. But fighting fires in the wildlands is not a war. And pretending that the firefight is an equivalent kind of undertaking allows you, encourages you to go to excesses on fighting it.
Just weeks later, news of a different kind of wildfire tragedy.
This is the deadliest wildfire involving firefighters in decades. The group, a hotshot team, was an elite unit.
We'd been getting reports throughout the evening. A team of firefighters had lost contact with their commanders.
And 19 of them have now been declared dead. That's the worst toll since 1933. We're on our way to the airport now to try to get down there as quickly as possible.
Pretty quickly, it became clear something terrible had happened.
It's one of the worst wildfire disasters that's ever taken place.
Is this the furthest point we can go to?
Yeah,
still?
It is.
I think the average age for these firefighters was 22. And so it's such a young life, and they gave it up to protect that community.
The Granite Mountain hotshots were deployed on what seemed like a routine mission. They expected to be home after a couple of days of cutting line around this small retirement community of Yarnell.
From up here, you can actually really see the proximity of Yarnell to the place where the firefighters died. It's a lot closer than I thought it was. The houses really seem like a few hundred meters from the actual spot.
The last contact from the team was a desperate radio call. The fire was upon them. They were deploying their shelters.
The fenced-off area is actually where they found the bodies after they deployed their fire tents.
The media is clamoring for answers. What were the firefighters doing there? Why were they caught in that spot?
Basically, the wind changed.
Was there a lookout?
I do not know that.
Wouldn't there be a protocol?
I think what you're trying to get at here is exactly what happened, and we don't know that, okay? We have 19 people that are dead that are brothers of ours, okay? A fire, a wildland fire specifically, is a very dynamic and moving situation.
For those who lost fathers, husbands, brothers, the struggle to comprehend their loss is just beginning. In this tight-knit community, it seems like almost everyone knew the firefighters personally. The job had its risks, but nobody could have anticipated a tragedy on this scale.
You're trained to pull your shelter, but you're not supposed to be in a situation where you may have to, you know? That's your last line of defense. That's when you pull your shelter, something went horribly wrong.
Brandon Bunch had been a member of the crew until a few weeks ago. He'd reluctantly left the job to spend more time with his family.
They're my best friends, man. I mean, you travel with them, you eat with them, you sleep with them. You do everything as a unit. I just was really close with them. They're like my brothers.
It's hard to explain, but it's like somebody taking half your soul right out of your body. My son was my life.
David Caldwell's son Robert was just 18 when he started. He'd asked his dad for a check to cover the initial training.
That's been the hardest thing for me to bear, that I helped him along. He really wanted to do this, you know, but maybe if I guided him into something else, you know, he'd be talking, I wouldn't be talking to you today, you know.
The last time David saw his son was 2 nights before the fire.
They were getting in the car. Before he closed the door, I waited to him and said, "Robert, don't be a hero." And he just smiled back to me and got in his truck. That's the last thing I said to him.
David Turbyfill also lost his son, Travis. A metal worker, he's honoring the fallen firefighters in the best way he can.
I did this design, I believe, Tuesday evening after they perished.
He says he could barely get through engraving Travis's name.
That's when it really first hit me that they were gone, because their names were down. You know, we knew all the names. There was no turning back.
One letter at a time, he says, he came to terms with his loss.
You can see you know, a yellow flame coming out the bottom of the, you know, as the letters are being cut. They died in fire, they are reborn in fire.
David's hope is that the tragedy spurs a national conversation about how the country deals with wildfire.
Every accident we've had, there's a reason for this. But in my mind, errors were made long before they ever went to the fire.
Anthony Rose. John Person Jr. Travis Turbyfill.
I think that there's nobody in this country who would disagree with the proposition that we have the most, you know, well-trained wildfire, you know, firefighters probably in the world. Problem with firefighters, they're their own worst advocates. And in a world where they're increasingly going to face impossible, dangerous situations, they're going to die and they're going to be injured. We celebrate them as heroes, but we don't ask, you know, should they have been in harm's way like this?
I've been asked to keep my voice down because we are so close to the ISIL position.
Who is in charge? Are they going to be held to account?
Right now, we're following the research team into the fire.
They are learning how to practice democracy.
Just seen tear gas being thrown.
There's somebody care about us, man.
Several UN workers were kidnapped.
This is what's left of the hospital.
It's a crime that's underreported.
What do you think killed them?
We're making history right now.
Al Jazeera America.
Mike Davis has been studying the tragedies caused by wildfire for decades. In his native Southern California, at least, he says, the growing human cost is directly linked to the pace of development.
So this is the kind of area where you grew up?
Over these hills, where we were, is the area where 1,000 homes were destroyed by the Cedar Fire.
And there's more homes going up right here?
Oh yes, there's a home boom beginning to start. All of this could easily burn. It's a totally unreasonable expectation that firefighters should defend, each property. If they fail to, it becomes the source of a political inquisition. Why didn't you send in the tankers after dark? Who cares if the pilots are told that it's unsafe to fly?
Tonight, the massive mobilization of equipment and manpower we've been witnessing across the West the last few weeks is on the move to California.
A few weeks later, and the biggest and most high-profile fire of the season has broken out. Yosemite National Park is under threat. An uncontrollable blaze that's doubling in size every day.
This is the whole burn area here?
95 square miles.
95 square miles.
105,400 acres.
Wow. For some of these firefighters, this could be their 6th or 7th major fire of the season. A long, hot summer filled with risks that have too often turned to tragedy.
If you get a spot, I want to know where, how big, and intensity, immediately.
We're going to want some eyes somewhere. If it's got to be aerial or if it's got to be something, we got to have a lookout.
Bravo firing lookout. Okay, let's get it done. Let's button this up.
The brush is ready to burn, and it's getting later in the season, so it's definitely going to be up there and some of the biggest in California.
And the helicopters are dropping water on that side, and on this side, these firefighters are actually setting fire to the hillside right here so that this area is burned, that the main fire won't be able to jump across the valley and threaten the properties down below.
Prison inmates are at this fire too. While the hillside is set ablaze, they're hiking down to clear trees from the valley floor. They'll be spending the night there until the job is done. The forest has been burning day and night for a week now.
Glad to see everybody here this morning. I'd like to start off with reviewing our objectives.
Every morning, this scene repeated.
Provide for firefighter and public safety. That's always our top priority. Provide protection to communities within the fire area. Manage cost effectively for the values at risk.
For us, and for this film, this is the last fire of the season. And we wanted to get as close to the front line as we could.
As we go along, the sky is getting darker and darker, and it feels like we're actually getting really close to the heart of the fire.
Here, the forest hasn't burned in decades. The flames are moving quickly into the crowns of the trees.
We can hear the sound of the helicopters flying overhead, doing water drops. The sound of the sap popping and the branches falling in the forest is pretty deafening here. This is really very close to the heart of this fire.
I appreciate if you guys get your shots real quick. So let's get out of here because we're going to be in harm's way if we don't.
Okay, well, we've been told we have to move out of here right now because these flames are incredibly high. This is one of the biggest fires that we've seen so far this season. We've never seen anything like this. There's a really loud roaring sound of these trees going up in flames. It's actually pretty scary, and we're going to get out of here now.
If this is a war against wildfire, it seems that for now, nature has the upper hand. With each new fire season, the costs of the current strategy get higher. And for those whose lives are on the line, the casualties become too many.
You know, you would think that the death of 19 firefighters in Yarnell was a wake-up call.
This calls for radical rethink, not just of how you fight fire in California, but the role of the federal government, not just in providing resources to fight fires, but in taking responsibility to control development, regulate land use, and protect the natural resources that are in such great danger.
We're not just talking about abstract policies. We're not just talking about various agendas. We're talking about real people, and there are real consequences to decisions.